Sharon was upset, and especially angry at me, Frank Miller, which was understandable. As we drove home from a party hosted by a couple she knew, Hank Vanderlyn, Sharon sat in her seat as far away from me as she could get, with her brow furrowed as if the milk was curdling. I couldn't help but wonder why she was so angry with me, and to be honest, she had every right to be angry when I ruined her night. I should be ashamed of disgracing my wife, the mother of our 3 children. I'm ashamed of my mistake. I wasn't interested in attending the party. It was the first time we'd been invited to one of their events, but my wife had heard of them and managed to get an invite through a mutual friend. She forgot to tell me that all the wives had to put their house keys in a bowl and mix the bowls together, and the husbands would choose a key without looking. As the party ended, I realized what was going to happen. I was overcome with a wave of anger. I had never been so angry with Sharon. I grabbed her hand and forced her into the kitchen. Can you imagine the party ending like this? I shook my head. I knew you wouldn't agree. If I had a vote, you're right, I wouldn't agree. It's just one night, she added. Let's spice up our marriage. I'm not interested in an experience like that. I told her, let's apologize and leave Frank. We can have a little excitement. I crave excitement, and just for this one night, it was just one time. It's not going to happen again, and I've already made a commitment to put the keys to our house in the bowl, so there's no going back. It's not too late to change my mind. And I'm not going to let it happen again. I'm not going to let it happen again. I'm not going to let it happen again. Look at me taking her hand. I led her back into the living room where a bowl of keys awaits, but Sharon won't have it and takes my hand reluctantly, leaving me. I let her go and walk over to the bowl and firmly tell her I wasn't told I had arrangements for this tonight, and I don't intend to share my wife with anyone. I turned to face the party guests who had unexpectedly gathered. I made it clear that I had not been informed of the nature of this event until my wife dragged me here. I reiterate, Sharon, the decision is yours. You can come with me and leave this madness, or you can stay and never come home again. I turned to my wife, whose face was red with embarrassment, and she challenged me and then apologized for her rude behavior. She yelled at me, how could you embarrass me like that in front of everyone? We will never be invited there again. It was Sharon who embarrassed you, so what did you embarrass me with? I don't want another woman, Sharon. I reserve this intimate activity for my wife. I told her that after 10 years of marriage, I was disappointed to find her trying to invite other men into our bed. I don't think I'm asking too much, especially considering that I've been a faithful wife for the past 10 years, and Sharon's request is very important. It's hard to believe what you're asking, but I can see that it's important to you. Yes, Frank, it really is, and I've been waiting for weeks for a night when I can just be myself and not a wife or a mother, and this will be the only time you'll ever be intimate with someone other than your husband. Yes, I think it is. And so I stopped the car suddenly, turned around in the middle of the road, and sped back to Vanderlyn's house. With a piercing screech of tires, Sharon screamed as I made a playful noise. What are you doing, Frank? I replied. When I got to their house, I noticed that all the other cars were still parked there. It looks like you still have a chance to get together, so go ahead, come out and enjoy a nice evening and go have an exciting meeting with a stranger. I want you to find someone who can fulfill your needs, and that's something I can't do, Frank. This is just an experiment, a new experience. Your qualities are impeccable. You've always been good to me, Sharon. I've always been faithful to you, and that's not going to change until our marriage is over. What does that mean? It means, Sharon, it's time to make a decision. If you decide to leave, then go to your adulterous friends. Even if you don't have a husband by your side, they'll be happy to accept you. Sharon, her hand rested on the doorknob, hesitant, contemplating her next move. Finally, she begged Frank to pick me up in the morning, as soon as I knew which man's house I was staying at. I don't want to hear you say that, Frank. He won't be my partner, just someone to build intimacy with and try new things with. You're the only man I've ever loved and will ever love. Do you really believe that? It's hard to imagine that you could love me with such intentions. You know I'm on birth control, so this won't happen. Having sex with someone new is exciting, but it won't lead to pregnancy. I'm sure you know what you're doing. It's just one night. Nothing special, even for a few moments. It's not too much. We've got a whole future ahead of us. If you decide to walk away, we don't have a future. Sharon, I'm begging you for one last time to come to your senses, Frank. You're making a mountain out of a molehill, and I'm going forward, and you're going to have to live with it. Do you hear me? Tomorrow morning I'm going to be all over you again and erase all memories of this night. Tomorrow morning you'll be a part of the past, you'll be all mine, you'll see I'll take care of it. Sharon, listen to me, I mean it. If you get out of the car and come back to this house, our relationship is over. One careless night could cost you your marriage and your family, and I'm not going to let that happen. A careless night could cost you your marriage and your family, and I won't let that happen. We're married. We'll be together forever. We're meant to be together. I love you deeply, and I know you feel the same way about me, Sharon. Please don't be a child and treat our situation as if it's an exciting journey we're going on together. Exciting for you, but a tragic end for us. You don't understand, Frank. I'll convince you in the morning. You know very well what I'll do. Do you really think I'd want to touch your filth? Do you really think I'd want to touch your dirty body after you've spent the night with someone else? You're going to touch me, but what else would I do? She closed the car door and I immediately stepped on the gas, the tires rattling loudly, and as I drove halfway across the block I looked in the rearview mirror and saw her standing on the curb, completely stunned, staring at me with her mouth open in horror, and when I turned the corner, she was gone. I was hoping that she would contact me immediately, admit her mistake and ask me to come back for her, but unfortunately, I received no such call. I was devastated and tears streamed down my face, making it difficult to see what was in front of me. It was clear from her behavior that she believed I would forget her betrayal. She probably thought I would get angry and ignore her for a while, and then she could use her charms to lure me back to bed and all would be forgiven, but she was wrong. My father had told me that if a woman wanted to have sex with another man, then she had mentally committed adultery. 8-year-old Rebecca and 4-year-old Frank Jr. I drove aimlessly for about 30 minutes hoping that Sharon would call me to pick her up. I hoped she would call me to pick her up, but the caller ID was not Sharon. Nevertheless, I answered the phone. Hello Frank, this is Rick Wilson, a friend of yours from when you left the party not too long ago. Your lovely wife gave me your phone number and she thinks I can convince you to come back. All the men here envy you. She keeps teasing that someone is going to have a night to remember and she wants you to experience it too. It's getting pretty tense around here, with everyone trying to find their partner for the night. Rick Wilson, you manipulative wife bastard, may you suffer in hell. As for the other guests at your party, including my unfaithful wife, may you all suffer a terrible fate. I found our marriage license, tore it into 4 pieces, and then hit the wedding ring with a hammer a few times until it was flat. I decided to look for a motel a few miles outside of town, but before I did that, I went back to the Vanderlyn house one last time. A few cars had left the party, a few people were standing outside talking, and Sharon was nowhere to be found. I figured she had either left with her new partner or was living here now. The motel I eventually found was in a nearby town, and although it looked small from the outside, it was quite comfortable to spend the night in. The first 2 relaxed me, and as I pulled out the third the phone rang. It was Sharon, but I sent the call to voicemail as I was sure she wasn't calling to ask me to pick her up, and Rick Wilson relayed this message. How many times do you have to put up with this? It was just one night, and just because I allowed a new man to have sex with me a couple of times doesn't mean I'm immoral. He seemed kind and assured me he wouldn't pressure me. I don't like him. He's married and has kids like us. Since you're home, I'll go to him. I suggested to Glenn that everything should be simple and familiar, and Glenn agreed, especially considering that this was the first time I had ever lived intimately with anyone, and he assured me that as soon as we were finished tomorrow, he would take me home. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. The words stabbed me like a knife. I never thought my wife could be so stupid and reckless. Sharon had always been a bit careless, but I never thought it would lead to such tragic results. Her stupidity had cost her everything, her life with her husband and maybe her children. I know I should have ignored her message, but I couldn't help myself. I dialed her number and she answered on the 3rd ring. This may be the last time you hear from me, and you don't realize the consequences of your actions, but you'll soon be enjoying your time with Glenn, because the price will be greater than you anticipated. Remember Sharon, as soon as you sleep with Glenn, our marriage is over, and I'm looking forward to the moment when I'm rid of you once and for all, and my attorney will be contacting you next week. Why are you doing this to me? How could you say such a thing to me? I'm your wife. Can't you just let me spend the night at Glenn's? I'm not getting a divorce. I'll be home in the morning and then we can talk about everything. I'll be home now, but I promised Glenn I'd be with him tonight. Please understand, I have to. He has my key. I promised him he could be with me. I love you, Frank. My love for you will always be the same. He's already here. Oh God, please understand me. I heard her say softly. Make love to me, Glenn. It's my night. I'll see you in the morning, honey. She added. I couldn't help but call her back. I couldn't resist calling her back, but the phone rang several times before going to voicemail, and it was obvious she was already answering, so I left a message. You're gonna look into his eyes all night long and experience new feelings you didn't even know you had, Sharon. You broke my heart, and I don't think I'll ever forgive you for that, and you kept your promise to Glenn, and that's impressive, and you just met him and you can't keep the vows that you made during our 10 years of marriage, and I don't feel like I know you anymore, and you won't be able to see me in the mornings, and you probably won't be able to see me ever again, but you need to. Get ready, because you are going to be served with divorce papers next week, and the divorce papers, and the divorce papers, and the divorce papers, and the divorce papers. The settlement and the charge of adultery. Sharon has not been returning her phone calls. I know how excited she gets at intimacy. She feels like she's entered into another realm where nothing exists but her and her partner. Whether she got my last message or not, it doesn't matter now. The damage has been done, and our marriage can't be undone. I didn't want to imagine my wife lying naked all night in Glenn's bed with a woman who until tonight had only been mine. Sharon was particularly loud when we made out, and I couldn't help but worry that she would call Glenn instead of me. I dozed off and woke up a couple hours later with tears running down my cheeks. The brutal truth of my wife's infidelity hit me in the head, and I knew I had to come up with a strategy to protect my children. I learned that adultery is a good reason for divorce in this state because of the possibility of not paying child support and the possibility of getting custody of the children. 30 a.m. She was as surprised as I was by Sharon's behavior in agreeing to take care of our children on the weekends and not telling them anything. I assured her I would pick them up as soon as I could make a plan of action, and I knew that Sharon was likely to get custody. I know that Sharon will most likely get custody, at least temporarily, and it breaks my heart to admit that, but until last night, she was a devoted mother to her children and a loving wife to me. I hesitated for a moment, debating whether to answer the phone or leave it on voicemail, and finally I decided to ignore the call. Her voice was shaky and full of tears. Damn it, Frank, pick up the damn phone and talk to me. Damn it, what do you mean I may never see you again? Why did you tear up our marriage license and throw away our wedding ring? I gave you this ring the day we got married and you promised to wear it forever. I knew you'd be upset, but I didn't think you'd do something like this. You mean a lot to me, Frank, and that night I spent with Glenn was wonderful. It made me feel young again, but even though we had a great time, you're the only one I love. You don't understand how important it is for a woman my age to feel wanted and needed, Frank. Please try to understand that it was just a physical encounter. It didn't mean anything else. Please, Frank, let's talk about this. I love you. You and our baby mean everything to me. Her voice was trembling as she spoke. Her voice was shaking as she spoke. It was just a physical contact. We've only had intimacy a couple of times, that's all. She continued to cry, and then the message ended abruptly. I didn't understand why she said she needed to feel wanted by another man. I had been showing her how much I loved and desired her. I sent her flowers, took her on dates, bought her lingerie on a regular basis, told her every day how beautiful she was and how much I loved her. Our intimate life was wonderful. We made love at least 3 times a week, and I always made sure to have an orgasm. I decided to go to an empty table in the cafeteria and ordered scrambled eggs, toast and black coffee. I only had a small breakfast, but I ended up drinking 6 cups of coffee. I knew I had to get up and make a better future for them. That thought inspired me to make up my mind, and all that was left was to figure out what to do. Sharon kept calling me that day, but I ignored her and sent her a voicemail instead, where she pleaded with me to understand her, but she never apologized for her behavior or admitted that she'd made a mistake, and simply asked for my support and understanding of her need for that night. In a way, I had to admire her ability to hurt me deeply with her words. I was appalled by her stupidity, but there was a positive side. I had gathered enough recorded evidence of her cheating to use in court. Mom told her that I was distressed by her behavior and did not want to communicate with her. Sharon began to cry, explaining that I didn't understand the situation. Mom notes that no one can truly understand the pain a spouse feels when they are cheated on because of an extramarital affair. Sharon asked if she needed to pick up the kids and take them home, but my mom suggested they stay with her for a few more days until things stabilized. I told them that their mom was working on an important project and that they would have to stay with their grandmother for a few more days. We played together, ate dinner together, and then I hugged and kissed them goodbye and headed back to my motel. As I drove past my house, tears welled up in my eyes once again, and they streamed down my face as I mourned for what I had lost, realizing that it had left me forever. A thought flashed through my mind that maybe the man's car was hidden in the garage, but the only light in the house came from downstairs in the kitchen, suggesting that Sharon was the only one alone today. In that moment I realized that I was still no different to her, that despite the fact that I had no intention of resuming our relationship, and despite the precautions she'd taken, the betrayal of Trail still hurt me deeply. Her hair was disheveled and her mascara was smudged, hinting at her emotional state, and she was lying on the table in her bathrobe, facing me, her eyes closed tightly and at peace. I felt bad for her, but then I remembered the pain she'd caused me and the kids. My anger flared, but instead of confronting her, I got back in my car and drove away. Monday came earlier than expected, bringing with it a long list of things to do. I started the day at the diner, where I happily ate scrambled eggs and toast and drank black coffee, and after lunch I called my mom and spoke to each of my children on the phone, assuring them of my love for them and promising to see them soon. She asked me if something had happened and I replied that it had and promised to tell her later. During my last year at Old Miss College, I shared an apartment with two of my best friends, Douglas Prand and Maxwell McRae. Doug gave me permission to contact Max and meet him at the Lava Bar on the beach. I arrived early, Max arrived a little after 5, I arrived 10 minutes later, we exchanged greetings, got a table on the patio, ordered a beer, and had a toast. Frank asked Doug, "Your call seemed urgent to me, Sharon betrayed me and flaunted it." I confessed everything, Doug said. "It's hard, I can't believe she could do something like that." Max chipped in and said, "I thought so too, but she did it without guilt or remorse and thought I was overreacting. Can you believe that?" Max asked, "What's your plan now?" "I'd like to get divorced and make Glenn and the other partisans pay for what they did. If she is a good mother, then custody will probably go to her and you will have to pay alimony." "That's an achievable goal," Max said, "and the court encourages both parents to be actively involved in their children's education, provided they are both responsible caregivers. But when it comes to finances," Doug brought up the issue of Sharon being at home with the kids, "and I'm assuming you're earning a 6-figure income." He said, "How much money do you have in your bank accounts, both checking and savings accounts? Do you have investment accounts or IRAs?" $000 to $800, but if you can provide evidence of her infidelity, which seems like a compelling argument for you to avoid paying alimony, you need a highly qualified divorce attorney, and I work with one of the best family law attorneys in Mississippi, Crazy Simmons. You want me to set up a counseling session with her, and of course the sooner, the better." I replied to Doug that he'd try to protect my money, and I promised to send him all the necessary information. As I drove back to the motel I felt a relief I hadn't felt in a long time. All the problems I needed to solve flashed through my mind, and just then the phone rang. Sharon was calling. So I stopped the car and picked up the phone. "What do you need, Sharon?" She didn't waste any time and got straight to the point. "What do you think I want, Frank?" I answered her bluntly and she burst into tears. "Frank, please don't say that leaving you for one night after 10 years of marriage shouldn't be grounds for divorce. Adultery is considered grounds for divorce in Mississippi, and what you did was treason. I warned you that if you had an intimate relationship with another man, our relationship was over. For God's sake, Frank, please don't do this. I thought we were happy together, living in a beautiful house with 3 lovely children. I thought we had a wonderful sex life, but you ruined it. You slept with a stranger and flaunted it, Frank. We've always been happy. I just wanted to spend another night with someone from our long-term relationship, just to try something new. No harm, no foul." I interject, "You don't seem to see the damage you've done. Your selfish behavior has destroyed our family overnight. Our lives have been torn apart into a million unrecoverable pieces. Sharon, you've broken my heart, and you've shown not the slightest sign of remorse. Please remember, I am your devoted husband. I have loved you since the day we met. I have worked tirelessly to provide you and our children with the life that you wanted. But you betrayed me. You found solace in the arms of a stranger. You gave him the part of you that you promised 10 years ago belonged only to me. You made that vow in front of God, our family, and all our friends. And last night you betrayed me. You ignored my pleas to change my mind, Basically, you told me to leave and do whatever you wanted, implying that my feelings didn't matter at all. And Frank, I don't want to be like this. I don't understand how this is going to affect you. I'm just trying to get myself together and do something different. I want you to know that I love you and this has nothing to do with you, and I need to do something for myself, and that's why you're here. Last night you and Glenn cheated on me and you left yourself out of the loop, and I answered you harshly. You didn't think about how this would affect me and our children, and I intend to share the truth with everyone just like you belittled my feelings when I found out about your infidelity, and let's see how you deal with the publicity of your behavior, of the consequences. Oh, Frank, please change your mind. If my parents found out, they'd be devastated. But you trampled on a 10-year marriage to a faithful man for the sake of a brief moment of pleasure with a stranger who only craved momentary gratification. Sharon, don't you feel guilty that Glenn had sex with you 4 times and that this led to the collapse of our family? I'm serious, Frank. What's wrong with allowing another man to be physically intimate with me on multiple occasions? I made a decision that I wanted to explore intimacy with another man. It wasn't a reflection of my feelings for you, Frank. I just wanted to get to know someone else again, with the intention of coming back to you and being faithful to you. But as it turns out, you didn't appreciate my desires, and despite my repeated requests for you to change your mind, you just laughed and waved me off. You destroyed the bond that we've shared for more than a decade and stripped away the intimacy we used to have. Maybe our commitment to each other didn't mean much to you, but it meant everything to me. Our physical relationship brought 3 lovely children into our lives, all of whom love us both dearly. We used to be a cozy family devoted only to each other, but to me this was a complete betrayal of our family, a betrayal of your commitment to be loyal to me and to respect me. You chose to be with another man, and while you may think you've succeeded, the truth is you've simply left behind everything we once held dear. I begged you not to do it, but now I can't forgive you for betraying me, and that wound will never heal. I'll give you the names of your lovers, Glenn, and everyone I can identify who was at the party. Imagine what's going to happen when your unfaithful friends find out that you played a role in the disintegration of their group and threatened to tarnish their reputations. Mad Simmons' attorney at law's office was the moment I realized I'd found the perfect attorney to help me deal with the chaos in my life. Instead of wasting time on small talk, Maddie immediately delved into the details of my divorce petition. I explained that I was ready to split our assets equally with my future ex-wife, Sharon, and that I was considering offering her our house in exchange for a reduced monetary settlement. I understand that it will not be easy to get full custody of the children, but I still want unlimited visitation rights without paying alimony. I produced all the recordings I had of Sharon admitting to having an affair with Glenn, proving her infidelity beyond a shadow of a doubt. She said, but if we found an impartial judge, the recordings should be admissible in court, and we spent the rest of the hour formulating a strategy against Glenn and the other members of the wife-swapping party, and she expressed skepticism about our ability to obtain monetary damages from them. I told her that would be enough for me, and I handed over the deposit and asked for Sharon's services as soon as possible, which she assured me wouldn't be long, promising to give me advance notice. I promised to pick them up on Friday so they could spend the weekend with me. Sharon seemed worried and I sympathized with her, but I couldn't ignore the fact that the situation was of her own making. On Thursday, I met Doug and Max for dinner at the Oyster House for hand-caught oysters and martinis, and over a meal and a drink, I told them about my children and the current divorce process. After reaching an agreement, we came up with a fairly simple plan to cause trouble at the Wife Swap Club without exposing ourselves to potential libel charges. His plan was to write an editorial exposing the fact that the Wife Swap Club was bigger than expected by discreetly posting photos of couples, hinting at the involvement of some corporations, but not naming them directly. I provided Max with the information I had, and he assured me that he would use it as a starting point for his investigation. After exchanging goodbyes, we said our goodbyes and agreed to see each other again soon. My children occupied the most important place in my heart, and I solemnly vowed to be with them always. The following Monday, Max called me, and a friend of his at the paper agreed to the conception of the plot, which is now being filmed with the couple who entered the Vanderlink and the new couple who left it together. If all goes well, the scandal will no doubt make headlines this weekend. I prayed for the best and she vowed to do everything possible to make me forget her behavior, but she never apologized or admitted she was wrong. Shortly thereafter, Doug told me that he had managed to stash some of my money in my children's names, and Max happily contacted me to tell me that his reporter friend had gotten information about this company's upcoming wife swap and Vanderlink meeting on Friday night. If all went well, the article would be published in next week's paper. In Mississippi, spending a night with someone other than your spouse is considered adultery. "Why are you so angry with me, Frank?" she asked me in tears. "I still love you, Glenn, and I've only had a couple of intimate relationships. It wasn't an affair." "I'm really sorry, Sharon, but in my opinion being unfaithful to my husband is considered treason. Is that what you want me to say? It's time to face the truth, Sharon. Our relationship is over. I tried to warn you and begged you not to do it, but you did it anyway, and now you have to face the consequences. I think you may have new problems in the future. Goodbye, Sharon." That's the end of the conversation. The main problem was my lingering love for Sharon. The feeling seemed to be ever present. I knew I had to avoid Vanderlin's party on Friday night, but I couldn't resist the temptation to at least drive over there and see what was going on there. I also wanted to see if Sharon's car was there, even though I had a feeling that she wasn't going to be coming to the party. I noticed the parked van parked across the street from the house, assuming the reporter was in the neighborhood and hoping he'd find out the truth the next day. Max's friend and reporter contacted me to ask me for information, and I didn't hesitate to say yes. He asked me to tell him my observations and impressions from my time at the house during Keyfest. I did my best to explain how the keys were placed in a large bowl, and although I didn't witness the moment when the men randomly chose a key and left with the woman who had it, I understood the concept from my wife's explanation. As we were about to say goodbye, he asked me if it was worthwhile to mention that he knew of at least one marriage that had been ruined by a party and children who had suffered as a result of their parents' divorces, and I suggested that he wait until the names were announced. It was clear that these people belonged to Bowie's elite. By Monday, the entire city was buzzing about the scandalous events and lavish parties, and several pastors even gave radio and TV interviews denouncing the sin that abounds in the Christian community. Personally, I found the situation amusing and saw it as punishment for the pain I had experienced after losing my wife and family, even though some people found out that I had been deceived and I was indifferent. For months, Sharon persistently tried to reconcile with me, but I remained firm in my decision to divorce. Eventually, we ended up divorced and I was awarded joint custody of the children. During our divorce, I decided not to embarrass Sharon and made her recordings public. Some of the couples who had been at the important party ended up getting divorced and leaving town. Sharon and I parted ways, and she was humiliated. I hope this was a lesson to her, and while she probably doesn't understand why I'm so worried about her behavior, I'm going to move on and wish her good luck with her future husband.